Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this episode we're going to do a little bit of electrical work, adding auxiliary power, USB power, and a new gauge for the temperature in this 91 F-150. So let's start with the obvious one in this picture here, and that's this yellow box here. This is an Autometer Cobalt digital gauge for water temperature. And boy, have gauges gotten super expensive. So we'll be installing that because the one that's in the truck doesn't work. The next thing is this little bag here, which is just USB power, supposedly USB 3 compatible or whatever, quick charging. This is just an Amazon special. I actually bought this at a local shop here. And I think this is also an Amazon special. It's just a little 4 fuse kind of block, bring in your power, and then your output goes there to your devices. The plan here is to do a relay powered switch here, do one fuse for all my digital gauges, and then one fuse for the USB, and one fuse to be used for just powering stuff on a relay. So let's go inside the truck and I'll show you where I figured out how I'm going to position my new power relay to kind of shoot power to all this stuff. All right, so I just removed this panel, which is pretty much right up here, covering everything just to make it look nice. And I have here my fuse box on the left hand side. Now I basically just messed around in here and kind of put the multimeter and just try to find a source that was open. I ended up finding this guy which had no fuse in it, and just checked it to make sure that on key or run position there would be power, and then if I removed the key that there would be no power, because I kind of want it to be switched so it's on and off. There's nothing constantly running and possibly draining the battery. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually just going to try and put a spade connector in there and then just double check to make sure that that fits and that I actually do have key and power. All right, so I popped in my spade connector. Now, not sure how I'm going to do this. All right, let's see if this works. Basically, I'm just trying to show you that, move some stuff around here that, well, if I can get it to stay on, that there is no voltage here. The key is off. Oh, what? Or is it on? Oh, that wasn't doing that before. Okay, strange. All right, just trust me when I say that that's keyed power. I kind of don't have a good setup to kind of show you the meter and all that at the same time. But that's the spade connector. I just kind of shoved it in there similar to a fuse, and that is keyed power, so I can move on to the next step. So the next step is to try and get power from here to in there to that little distribution box, if you will. The plan is to kind of just connect it directly to the battery, run a wire straight across. And I did a little bit of digging in this area because this is where most of the wires connect. There's the main harness down there, the computer, and a few other things. But I did end up finding a nice little spot. So if you follow this little red wire, there's this little kind of, I'm not sure what it was for. Maybe it's just to kind of vent air or something like that when you close the doors and whatnot. But it's actually a nice little hole with a kind of grommet that fits my 8 gauge wire. So that is what I'm using, is 8 gauge from the battery into the cab. And to fuse it or to break it, I'm actually going to use this 30 amp breaker. I probably could go up to 40 amps with the 8 gauge wire. It shouldn't be a big deal, but these weren't too expensive. I found the fuses with the wires were a little bit more expensive than this. So I went with a breaker style. We'll see how it goes. I've never really used one of these. It kind of works like a breaker in your house. It heats up, snaps open, or is it closed? I always forget. And cuts the flow of electricity, and then once it cools down, it closes again. Now, if any of you have had problems with these, please let me know. I'm not 100% used to this stuff, and will or could change it to a fuse. So let me set this basic part, get it into the cab. All I got to do is put a couple of ends on the wires, connect them, and then go from there. All right, so I kept the coil of the wire, the 8 gauge wire, and just kind of unwound it through the little tiny hole. This way it saves me from, wasting and maybe mismeasuring and stuff like that. And as you can see, it comes out that little hole, that little grommet, and goes across all the way down here to the breaker and then to the battery connector. Now what I'm going to do is just kind of tape up these ends, tape that up, kind of zip tie it, and then just zip tie the whole thing through, and that way maybe I can save a few inches on the wiring and some change. All right, so the engine bay side is pretty much buttoned up. I'm just going to leave it unplugged for now. I put a bunch of tape on the breaker because the two poles are still exposed. Usually there's a clip that they fit into, but I couldn't find that. Not a big deal for now. It'll be fine there. It's not going to move. And then just kind of zip tied it all across. Still got to trim the zip ties to look like a pro, but let's move in on the inside. All right, got the relay. Got some spare wires that I had lying around. I used green for ground and white for the trigger, for the power. Basically connected them to pin 85 and 86, which is the trigger or the switch, if you will, for the main power. This is just an Amazon special 40 amp relay. Hopefully it doesn't burn out. I'm missing the connectors here for the larger 8 gauge wire, so I won't be able to connect that just yet. But what we can do is at least test the relay and do all the other connections and, you know, cut the wires basically. So let me go ahead and install that. All right, got the connections made. So I got the ground here on another little ground spot and then got the wire connected to the fuse box. Let's check it out on the key. So the key is in the ignition. I'm not sure if you're going to hear it, but technically once it's in the run position, you should be able to hear it click. A lot of little things clicking and beeping, so I'm not sure if you heard that, but I can tell you personally that it is working. All right, so since I'm waiting on those two little adapters or connectors, let's just kind of move on to setting other stuff up. So this is the USB. Basically, what the bag comes with is the actual USB connector. It also has a little like voltage display, so you know, whatever your battery is at, and you can actually turn it on and off with the little switch that's there. Comes with a mounting plate, comes with your wires and a couple screws for the mounting plate. I'm hoping not to use the mounting plate, but we'll see. For now, I'm just going to install it loosely and just make sure everything works. So let's just go ahead and make the connections to the little fuse box. So on the back of the actual USB connector is really simple. It actually tells you like positive and negative which ones to connect. Obviously red for positive, black for ground or negative. It did come with this little inline 10 amp fuse, but I'm not going to be using this because I'm going to be using that little fuse box. So I ended up just snipping it. I'm just going to put my own connector on there, a little spade connector, which will connect directly to the fuse box. All right, got that kind of temporarily set up. It is hooked up to the fuse box. I'll show you where I put that. Basically, the plan is to put this guy right in there. It's going to be nice and neat. It's going to almost look factory. I thought about replacing that one, kind of putting that back in there. But there's still a lot of things out there that actually use a kind of cigarette lighter attachment for powering, let's say, your tire inflator or whatever other gadget that you might have. So I kind of wanted to keep it just as a backup. Also keeps it kind of neat and clean, and putting it here gives me better access to it. And this is where I put the fuse box. It's pretty much right next to the original one, so it keeps it nice and simple. Just zip tied it, holds it in place. I already made my first connection, so that's ready to go. Just got to attach my gauge to it. Well, I got to get to it, attach the gauge, and then go from there. So what comes in the gauge box? So obviously the box, there's this little kind of shelf packaging or protective casing. It does have a seal. I already broke it just to check on everything. And then on the inside of that, you have your instructions, your little adapters, plus the thermostat or sensor, your wiring, and then the gauge, and then the mounting cup or clip. This is meant to be surface mounted, so if you were going to do like a pod or something, then you would need that. I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to put it yet, so I'm just going to leave it as is right now the way it is. So let me install the wiring and get that started. Well, after looking at this for a little while, I've kind of gotten myself into a beautiful disaster. I did take a little bit of a break because it's just a bit frustrating. But I can't seem to put the sensor there for the gauge. I tried a 90 degree, but the issue is now that if I were to put it there, I actually can't like rotate. Let me get this out of here for a second here. It's just because it's leaking really slowly. This part bottoms out on the piece that's right here. So the thermostat cover or whatever you want to call it. And I'm trying to figure out where to put it. So I had thought about putting it over here, but the problem is I can't put that one over here because it has a really long like bottom to it for the sensor. So it's actually like soaking in the coolant. I mean, it's all right because at the end of the day, I actually prefer to be it there. It's closer to the block and that triggers the fans. So I want kind of more of an immediate response. Now, the other thing that I've thought of is right back there, there's that tube that's there. I'm thinking I can attach it to there. I had a spare one from the 92 F-150, and I was able to undo that. Now, I'm just even wondering if I can rotate that in there or if it's going to fit properly. I think it will, but it's always hard to tell sometimes. And I'm trying to not dismantle too many things, because really that's kind of what I want to try and avoid is taking a bunch of stuff apart. But I don't know if that's going to be possible. I'm also trying to avoid like creating a coolant disaster here, but that's already a bit late. Anyway, I think I'll just start taking some of that stuff apart and see where I get. All right, admittedly, it wasn't too bad. A bit of a pain, but not too bad. So I unplugged that, which had the T in there, and that's the rod that goes to the heating block or the heater core, and that just goes to the throttle body right there. So now I got to put it all back together. I test fitted the parts a little bit, and they seem to fit. I'm a bit concerned with this. Whoop, I can't see it, but this part right here, there is a bit of a lip where that tube goes into. So I'm not sure how far I can crank that down, but I'll do the best that I can and then just run with it at this point. All right, woo, you know, pretty happy. Everything seems to have fit. Most of it is connected. I just got to connect that guy right there, which is the actual gauge, but everything is fine. It's, well, I guess pretty much back to original except for that T right there. I wasn't sure if that part was going to fit. It seems to fit. It's as tight as I can get it. Anyways, it's brass. You don't actually want to go too crazy on it. And with the thread sealer, that should help too. And as always, I put way too much. And right here, I swear, if it was just even a few more degrees off, I would not have been able to pop that back in there. It just barely fits. It doesn't make contact. And when I was installing it, I did get a little bit scared because I was like, oh, now do I have to think of something else? But I just had a little bit of an off angle and it screwed right in. And then I was able to clamp this back on. Oh, and if you're hearing gunshots, well, there's something going on in that area. Don't worry about it. I'm safe. All right, so back in the cab. Now, this is the kind of the mess of wires that you have for the gauge. It's pretty simple. It's basically red for power, black for ground. White is if you have a dimmer. I'm not actually going to be connecting that quite yet. And the, where is it? The purple and gray. Purple and gray right here. That is the one that actually connects to the sensor. So it's really simple, straightforward. Read the instructions, you'll get it. I think I mentioned it, but just in case I didn't, this USB power is just black and, whoop, that's red, not black, and this is black. And basically that's how you get your power. So red power, black ground. Now, I was trying to figure out how I was going to fish this little sensor right here, because you need a big enough hole. I mean, I guess I could try to unpin it and all that, but I just really did not want to. But I did find a big enough hole, so what I'm going to do is actually pass it through there. This guy right here is actually the air line, I guess, or the vacuum hose that powers or you know, sets up the cruise control. Right now I have the cruise control as disabled. I'm not using it. I don't think I will put it back in, but I'm hemming and hawing, so I'm just going to kind of nicely pull it out, tuck it, and get it out of the way just temporarily. But it did have this nice little grommet on there that'll protect the wires, and it's big enough to fit a sleeve through it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll show you that in just a second. But what I did is, just to make sure I could take it off and pass my wires through, is I just cut a slit in it nice and neat, and I'll pass all my stuff through there. So let me get that set up and I'll show you what I'm doing. So what I have here is just a wire loom, just your generic plastic wire loom, which is split, and then you can feed your wire through there. And that's going through that grommet, and basically I'm just going to feed all my wires through here and then make my connections. It'll keep it nice and clean and tight, and then at least keep the wires somewhat protected, or as much as I can. So let me go ahead and feed that through. I'll make the connection and make it nice and neat. All right, connection is made. It's in its little loom. It goes all the way back up to the firewall. Now that's the grommet that's there. It's just above the throttle cable. But I did put the slit facing down, so if some water or whatever got in there, it would at least drip out. I also decided to put the relay trigger into the cab, and I'll put it on the little fuse box with maybe some other stuff that I want to hook up to a relay. But anyway, at least it removes it from this EGR computer whatever thing, and then brings it into the cab, and I kind of have control over it. Woo! Okay. Sweating trying to fix some wires. That's crazy. Sweating to wires. Anyway, I kind of temporarily or permanently, whatever, tuck some of the wires up in there. Pop the relay up in there. All the connections are made. I got my little, what do you call it, spade connectors there. They are a tight fit for this 8 gauge, but I managed to get it to fit. Really, I don't think it should be those connections anyway. Now, all I got to do is just figure out the wiring for the gauge. Well, I mean, the placement, not necessarily the connections or anything. It's really, the end is just one of these connectors, and that's pretty much it. And then I'll be able to pop some fuses in and see if it lights up. All right, almost forgot. I double checked the instructions, and it says to use this dielectric grease or whatever it is in the actual connector that you use on the sender. Basically just keeps some of the dirt out. And I also checked, it says that it requires a 1 amp fuse in the fuse box for the actual gauge. All right, got the main battery, the 8 gauge wire connected. So far, nothing's happening. So that's a good sign. Got my fuses ready, but what I'm going to do is actually just try and, you know, turn it on. All right, pop the key in if I can. Seems to be okay. Let's just turn it on to the run position. I don't hear anything crackling. I don't see any smoke. So that's a good sign. Let me pop the fuses in. All right, pop the fuses in. Let's see what happens. It should light up. Hopefully you can see both of them. Oh boy, power. There we go. That is cool. So 78 is the current water temperature, or actually it's probably just the regular air temperature right now. And then here you'll see 12.3, that's the battery voltage, which is kind of low, but anyway. And then you should be able to turn it off by pressing this button. Yeah, but we'll keep it on since it's triggered by the run situation or the key. And I still don't smell anything burning, so that's a good thing. And there we go. Everything shuts off when I turn the key off. So that's good. So far so good. What I am going to do is I'm just going to actually let that set and, you know, harden up kind of thing. And then I'll get back. I'll actually run the engine and then make sure that, you know, everything is good. All right. So it's been sitting for maybe about 24 hours. All that stuff is dried. I'm letting the fuel pump prime right now because it seems to lose pressure over time. And then we'll give this a start. For anyone who is curious, I did change to a bit of a newer hose for the transmission line. The one I had before was from an old car because it was just what I had at that moment, but now that's upgraded, sort of. And as you can see, the temp is at 63. All right, so it's primed. It does that kind of when it's been sitting for a little while. And not sure exactly why. I'll have to look into that, but here we go. Alright, sorry, just had to do a quick check on the hoses just to make sure everything was good, wasn't leaking. And as you can tell, it's already climbing. Alright, I just stopped it just for a minute just to kind of make sure everything was okay. It does smell a little bit like burning coolant, but that's probably just the stuff that spilled. I didn't want to kind of do a quick pressurization. There's a little bit of gurgling over here. I think it's just this stuff here. Yeah, that's all it is. All right. So it seems to be okay for now. Let's start it up again. All right, just being a little overly cautious. I let it cool for maybe a few minutes. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't leaking. So let's just double check this again. The temp's going down. I'm not sure if the fans kicked in. I actually can't hear them. Usually they make a pretty loud noise, but they must have kicked in, or I have something else going on. So let me take a look. So I'm assuming the thermostat opened because I don't see any leaks. And the fans are not on. Well, that's definitely a 180 thermostat, or roughly thereabouts. So it's going back up. So I know my thermostat works. So 190. The fan should kick in soon. There we go, and the fan just kicked in. So that's pretty good. I mean, the sensor for the fans is close to being the same as the sensor for the Autometer gauge. I think it kicked in at about 191 or something like that. I've been holding the gas down a little bit at about 15 to 2000 RPM just to try and build some heat. So the fans are running now. So let's see if it brings it down or at least holds it. It's bringing it down. And definitely the thermostat is open. We know that worked because it cooled down just a few minutes ago. So let's see if it brings it back down to 180 or below 180. Well, it seems to be holding at 173, which I think is a decent operating temp. It's not like hitting 210. I'm sitting in a, you know, it's idling. It's not doing anything special. Well, you know, the big test is long road trips, but I mean, I've been through that, so that shouldn't be an issue. Honestly, I don't think I could be happier with the setup. I really like that radiator. I really like this gauge. It's super nice. Oh, the fan just cut off, so I think it has to sustain a certain amount of time under 175 or something like that. But either way, really happy. I'm glad that this gauge is nice. It's a good blue. I wasn't expecting it to be like that. Happy with the gauge, and again, happy with the radiator. Just overall happy with my setup. It was a bit of a pain to set up and deal with, and deal with all the little headaches that come with trying to do custom work. But again, super glad that I've done it. Enjoying the results. I'm gonna now just double check to make sure that the you know, there's enough coolant, because I did spill some, obviously. I topped up the what do you call that, the reserve or the overflow. But I'll just do a double check once everything cools down, and it should be good. Well, I found another thing that I just kind of forgot about. I just piled it away. This is just an antenna that you can plug inside the vehicle. I don't know how well it's going to be. It's also an Amazon special. This is all you get. It looks like one of the old alarm systems from way back in the day. I don't know how well this is going to do, so I'm not actually going to completely remove the original stock one. The stock one kind of runs in and winds up pretty much right over there. I'm going to keep it in there just temporarily, but what I'm going to try and do is kind of mimic where I actually want this antenna. I'm thinking of putting it just right up there, somewhere in there. I've already gone ahead and moved some of the plastic trim and all that stuff that goes there all the way up down to here. So what I'll do is I'll just roughly kind of route it where I want, and then see if that works. I don't know how the quality is, again, just from these things. It's a mixed review. I mean, I don't know if it's just because people place it in the wrong place or what. They're cheap enough that I thought I would just give them a try. So I'm gonna just temporarily install it and then test it out. So the connection is pretty much the same. I just popped out the older one, put in the new one, and then I kind of just temporarily ran it back there, and it comes down here. I'm actually just going to leave it hanging, but the plan is to route it here, and then behind all this stuff, and then put all the plastic molding and panels to cover it up. But I just want to test it first, so I'm going to see what happens. Well, I'm on the road doing just a little test on the gauges to make sure that they work. So far, I've been on the road for maybe about 20 minutes, and they've been working flawlessly. The temp gauge, when I'm not parked, stays below 180, and right now it's just above 190, and the fan's kicked in, so I know everything is working good. And the battery readout is showing that everything is working good and charging on the little USB charger. I'm going to try and grab some shots of that, but it might be a little bit bouncy, so we'll see what happens. Well, for a second there, it looked like the gauge was going to make a liar out of me, but it did come back down. Admittedly, the part that I was driving and filming on was a bit hilly, so it kind of skews a bit of the information, but honestly, it works well. I'm happy with it, and yeah, that's it. As for the antenna, it's kind of a mixed bag. If it gets the signal, it's really good. If it's just somewhat staticky, it won't really pick it up. I don't know if the way like the routing of the wiring is might affect it. It seems like it does kind of add to the receiving of the signal. So maybe once I lay it up, it'll help a little bit better. We'll see. Who knows? Okay, after my round of testing, what I've done is I've actually just placed it where I wanted it, kind of exactly right there, just above the rearview mirror. And then I, as you can tell, professionally routed it and secured it. Just electrical tape. There is a kind of a piece that goes over there, a little piece of molding or whatever you want to call it, plastic. And that's going to hold that in there. I just put the tape in there so that way I could just have it hold while I was trying to work on it. While I was at it, I just finished it routing and put the radio back into its normal place. The covers and all that back on. I still have to position the USB. Like I said, I was probably going to put it there and then just clean up some of the wiring so that way I don't pull on anything. But first, I'm just going to put the covers back on here and move on to something else. All right, no joke, I'm a bit nervous about doing this because it's kind of a one-way trip. I'm about to take this drill right here and then jam it into here. And I don't have another one of these. I already drilled a little pilot hole to get started. It's relatively in the center. Like I said, I am pretty nervous. I'm actually filming it just because, stuff happens and, well, you might find it funny even if I don't find it funny. So, here I go, I guess. Hopefully I got the right size. I checked it. And, maybe I should start. This is kind of freaky. Yep, definitely uncomfortable here. Oh, slow and steady. Oh, God. Why is it crawling? I don't like that. Oh, I really don't like that. That means the drill bit is bent. Ah, man. Yeah. Alright, I'm going to stop right there. Because if I use it, it's just going to make a really huge, nasty hole, and I don't like that. I'm actually just going to see if I have another drill bit. And see what I can do. Alright, well, had to get pretty much brand new everything. Mostly because it was cheaper to buy a whole new kit rather than just buying the drill bit or the chuck or whatever this is called. It just worked out that way. It was on sale. Why not? Now, I'm still kind of scared, but I do have a spare one. I actually ended up going to, what's it called? Kenny Upel here. And it's basically a parts puller. And I did find an actual one, another one of these from an 87 F-150. So I grabbed it for sure. You never know. It's a little bit worse shape condition than this. I think they had some weird key thing here. I'm not really sure what they were doing. But either way, I grabbed it just in case. And if it's not quite right, I can always just fix it and, make it work. So here we go. Like I said, still kind of nervous. I don't like cutting into nice pieces. But here we go. Ooh. It feels so wrong. Oh, God. Whew. Kind of did wobble a little bit. I think that was just from the hole that was there before. Now let's see if my piece actually fits. And it does. It does. Ugh. It's a bit of a loose fit, but what can I say? That's what happens when it walks around. But it does fit nicely. It looks, relatively centered and clean. Just bolt this right up. I'm not going to go crazy here. Just make it look nice. There we go. Good enough for me, myself, and I. So let's hook it up and see how that works. All right, so officially installed. It looks good. Underneath here, basically I just cleaned it up so some of the wires wouldn't dangle too much. And, you know, even the long wires, I kind of just coiled them up. Those ones there just tucked a little bit further back, so maybe I wouldn't grab it with anything, but the gauge itself is going to stay there. I'm hoping maybe I'll get some pods or whatever brackets just to hold it better in place. But for now it's holding and I can see it. That's all that matters. And all this will get covered up in just a minute and then it'll be back to normal. And that's what it looks like. It looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. They're both can't speak. The blues are relatively matching. Obviously, the Autometer one is nicer and cleaner, sharper. It's also a little bit brighter because I don't have that little light dimmer switch thing. But either way, super happy. Looks good. Well, I'm pretty happy with the turnout of all of these little things that I added. Well, these 3 things, 4 things actually, I almost forgot. So the first thing we did was add auxiliary power. Right now it's a max of 30 amps. I could probably bump it up to 40 amps without being too much of an issue, but that's installed pretty straightforward. As long as you know DC stuff, you can do it. I just hooked it up to a relay, so that way it would just turn on only when it was in the run position, not in accessories, because none of the stuff that I was hooking up to it needed to be an accessory. The second thing we did was add USB. This thing, well, had no USB, obviously, because of the age. I didn't want to use the cigarette lighter. I wanted something a little bit more stable, and then free up the cigarette lighter just in case I needed extra, because, you know, camera gear and batteries and charging and all that stuff. Then finished up the Autometer gauge. I really like this Autometer gauge. I actually think when you look at the price point, these are a really good mid-range gauge. They're not cheap where you're going to replace them a year from now, and they're not super expensive that you're blowing the bank for them. I highly recommend it. I liked it. I like mine. It's the Cobalt digital gauge. This one's just the water temperature, but they have a pretty good range and selection. I will definitely be getting more, especially more for this truck and some of my other projects. And then installed the antenna. It's not a really high-end antenna. I found that if I just left it dangling there, it didn't have as good a reception as if I had, when I laid it out and, you know, kind of taped it up against the windshield and then put all the plastic. I don't know if the car, or I mean the truck, acts as a, you know, an antenna itself, so having the wires close to it helps. It did improve it, but not significantly. I probably got a few extra channels that were a little bit stronger. But I kind of wanted to do an antenna delete, and now looking back here, I did forget to remove it, but I will remove it. It's not doing anything, and it's just kind of acting like a big, you know, lightning rod, so to speak, hanging out on there. Not sure what the plans are next for it. I do kind of want to clean it up, maybe get rid of some of the stuff that's on there, maybe do some touch-up paints to get rid of some of the rust. But that's going to be for a little bit later down the line. I'm trying to also get the lowering kit for it, but we'll see. It's always about time and money, and you know, we all go through that, right? And I'm nobody special, and, you know, I go through it. And I think that's it. I think that's it for this video, right? 4 things. Yeah. Okay. Everything's working. I'm pretty happy with it. So on that note, thanks for watching. Take it easy.